Hello. Let me begin with a story of a community of painters and storytellers who create scrolls depicting mythological stories and heroic legends. Walking from village to village, they would sing out their stories as they unfolded their painted scrolls, painted with vegetable dyes, pointing out specific images, asking their audiences to focus on the images as they listened to the words that they sang. In return, their village audiences would offer them a meal, perhaps clothes, a place to stay that night, and they would be given vegetables and rice to carry back home. But as new technologies of entertainment took over, as their audiences got hooked onto new stories that unfolded on larger screens at the cinemas or on smaller screens on television, the painter storytellers found it hard to make ends meet. Nobody wanted their stories anymore. But they realized soon that the very machines that churned out new stories and took away their audiences were also chattering with stories that were waiting to be told in a different mode. News became the source of their new compositions. In 2001, when the 11th September attacks happened, it caught their attention. In the hands of the Patachitrakars of Naya Pingla, a village in Medinipur in West Bengal, this event became a disaster scroll about the contemporary world. The scroll showed the Twin Towers. I don't think this is a laser pointer, but you can see the Twin Towers coming down, people escaping, falling to their death, George Bush meeting senators, the war in Afghanistan. Using their traditional mode of a mythicized universe, the Patachitrakars engaged with the contemporary event, seeing the loss of lives as human tragedy. As I interviewed them about what they wanted to depict in the scroll, I was told by Khadu Chitrakar, who's the husband of Radha Chitrakar, who you see here, that even if they had not witnessed this stunning event, they are masters at depicting human tragedy. Because it is what they have deep knowledge of, because tragedy hounds their lives at every step. In my life story interviews with them, they reveal that their lives are shaped by small disasters that happen with predictable regularity. Floods that force them to rebuild their homes almost every other year, illnesses to which they lose family members, in short, disasters that make them lose their shelter, their loved ones, and their hard-earned money. The memory of suffering, of not earning enough to overcome disasters, and their understanding of the tragedy of human life enables them to enter other worlds of suffering. Radha's song here speaks about the injustice of it all.
আমেরিকানের ইমান হানা আজব ঘটনা সে আজব ঘটনা ওগো আমেরিকানের বিমান হানা আজব ঘটনা সে আজব ঘটনা
She goes on to, I'll translate that for you. She's saying, in American land, that plane crash was really very stunning. The house that had 100 stories fell down, and then she goes on to say, why did you do this, Laden? Why did so many people lose their lives? What crime had they committed? Why did you kill thousands of people? The 9/11 or the Laden pot is the Patachitrakars' engagement with the historical event. And it happens at two levels. At one level, it's the actual event, and on the other, it's at the level of human emotions and intimacies. The event is recounted in a mythical mode. The two aircrafts, you'll notice, are painted with faces of demons. Their more emotional engagement, however, uses their own memories of suffering to relate to the historical loss of lives in America. These are lives with whom this community could not possibly have had any connection. And yet they have used their imagination to enter a different tragic universe. Is their imagination historical? Could we look at them as interpreters of historical events? We in India have never been trained to look at what are called the folk traditions as being resources for understanding past events. We are still figuring out, where do these traditions belong? Do they belong to culture, to history, to art, to literature? But when and why did we begin to pigeonhole resources as being relevant to one domain or another? Here is a map printed at the Edinburgh Geographical Institute in the 1900s. The territories in pink are the territories permanently administered by the government of British India. You'll notice that all the boundaries are in red, which denotes British India. And the territories in yellow indicate the native state. The map represents India in 1909, when the 4th Earl of Minto served as the 17th Viceroy and Governor General of India. Lord Minto, like other British administrators of his time, suffered from what historians have called the illusion of permanence. And he argued, the Raj will not disappear in India as long as the British race remains what it is. Because we shall fight for the Raj as hard as we have ever fought, if it comes to fighting, and we shall win as we have always won, unquote. He was not the only one. From the early 19th century onwards, a certain view of India, its people, its history, had been perpetuated by the British administrators. For the historian and political theorist James Mill, the past had no relevance for shaping reform in India, because no historical narrative could possibly be salvaged from India's vast mythological and legendary material. Mill thought that the past did not shape cultural identity. In fact, India could be reformed on the basis of rationalist principles alone. And it should be possible, he had argued, to replace its different codes with a single comprehensive law. Mill's History of British India, and there's a quote from his History of British India, was read by every British administrator, and unsurprisingly, in the colonial period, Indians was perceived as people without history. Indians simply did not have a sense of history in the same way that Europeans had. But these ideas also shaped how we as Indians began to study history. Our long apprenticeship with European ways of understanding the past made us look at history as interpretation of evidence only from official archives alone. As a result, in Indian history, written records were given precedence over oral sources. The textbooks I grew up with had stories of Indian freedom fighters and predictably ended with Nehru's Tryst with Destiny speech, after which we did civics. Stories of those who were represented in the official record, who became powerful once we became independent, were the only stories worthy of historical analysis. And such textbooks left out, and they still do, a range of people who engaged with the past and interpreted it through songs, performances, and oral narratives. Here is a story from a village in India you'll never find in a history textbook. Hardolpur is in the northernmost part of Madhya Pradesh. And the Sapera community that lives there, Saperas, as you know, are the snake charmer community. They claim, at least when I went there, they claimed to me that they knew nothing about snakes. Why did they say this? Is there a historical reason for this? The Indian Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 has outlawed snake charming. So this community, with its knowledge of snakes and poisons, can no longer play their instruments and make their snakes sway to the tune of the bean, the pipe. So they claim now to be performers, a shift that has come about because of this act. They earn their money by working on construction sites, which is an uncertain occupation. But slowly, as I begin to talk to them and they begin to trust me a little, they do bring out a snake, as you can see, and demonstrate their skills. As we are about to leave, a local NGO worker tells me how they cannot really live without snakes. They're very, very connected to this world. And I come away thinking of the dimension of human and non-human communication that we must miss out when we turn their craft into a crime. We have not attempted to understand their past, their way of learning, their training, or their history. And we in India have made inadequate use of their deep knowledge of snakes and poisons. And perhaps it is this apathy that is ingrained in the history that looks only at certain kinds of documents and certain kinds of people and doesn't look at the practitioners of oral traditions. Perhaps this is what Tagore had in mind, when he said, what passes for Indian history does not tell us anything about the people of India. So in the reconstruction of our past in India, we do not come across people like Gangaramji, who you see here. He's the only surviving Pahari Likhai artist in a village in Uttarakhand. I had to cross about 2 hills before I could reach his house. He had learnt his craft as a teenager with 5 tools and went on to build 150 tools. And this is not an achievement that is celebrated. In fact, there has been a silence about the lives of ordinary people and lives of people like Gangaramji, where beautifully crafted doors and windows adorn many urban institutions and homes. We do not once think about their past or their history. Or Radha Chitrakar, whose song you heard, whose Patachitra you saw, and her community, whose paintings hang in museums, are collected by collectors across the world. We pause perhaps to appreciate the richness of the color, the figures, and in the case of Gangaramji, we pause to look at the intricacy of the carvings. If you look at the pine cone he's carved there, but we rarely pause to contemplate their lives and their history. If history has to transform the way we look at ourselves as a people, we must move towards an understanding of a past that embraces the lives of everybody, not just leaders whose examples have inspired us, but the extraordinary lives of ordinary people, but also the ordinary lives of ordinary people. I'm saying that we need a paradigm shift in our approach to history, to focus on ordinary people and their past and how that shapes our present. For these voices remind us that India's journey is not about singular journeys in leadership, but collective ones. Not a faint echo of what the colonial regime told us history should be, nor what political leaders identify as history, but a strong affirmation of our relationship to the past and the myriad interpretations ordinary people bring to it. Thank you very much.